Hello, and welcome to Artpop Talk. I'm Bianca.
And I'm Gianna.
Gianna, today we're talking about washrooms, bathrooms, or restrooms for the lay people, as we might call them. Can you think of the coolest bathroom that you've ever gone into?
Yeah, well, the coolest restroom that I've been to, I can say, is maybe the one at Longwood Gardens in Delaware. And in 2014, they made the list for America's best bathroom.
Ooh, wow. Today, I will be sharing a story about an experience I had with a seemingly artful washroom, but one whose decor created the worst bathroom experience I've ever had. So, you know it's bad.
This is truly a wild story. After we hear about the situation, Bianca and I are talking about what starkly gendered environments means for art museums and creative spaces. Bianca, are you ready to Artpop Talk?
Hey, Gianna. How has your week been? We were just spending a lot of time talking before we started recording, but for the Artpop Tarts.
This week has been pretty good. Bianca and I got to be guest speakers for a gender and visual culture class for their last class of the semester, actually. Congrats to all of those students for making it through yet another semester in the pandemic. But it was really so much fun, and I'm just so grateful for the mentors and relationships that we have at our college who just continue to support us. I just honestly feel like a spoiled brat, and I felt like such a cool kid, if I am being totally truthful.
Oh yeah, no, 1000%. I felt so cool showing up to a class. I told the class that I felt like Pete Davidson appearing at a Zoom call for like NYU. It was so much fun. And Gianna, it was really cool because it was just one of those moments where we were asked to speak about us and the podcast as a career, and it just felt like, it just felt really exciting to see the podcast moving forward in that way.
Yeah, well, we talk about this a lot. I mean, you and I see each other's faces and we are having a conversation right now, but sometimes with this type of media, you just feel like you are talking into the ether and just hope that people are paying attention and listening to what you're saying. So any opportunity we do have to talk face-to-face, even virtually, with people that seek an interest in the podcast, it does feel really validating. I mean, we have talked about this a lot as well. You know, this is a small business that you and I have started, and we're putting a lot of our time and energy and money into doing that. And to be validated by your former mentors or people in our field, it just is one of those things that helps me keep going, I suppose. And to know that like we have such a beautiful community here who is supporting us. And just want to give the biggest shout out to the truest Artpop Tart, Micah Damon, for mentioning Artpop Talk in her gender and visual culture class.
Yes.
And
oh my God.
Led to us coming in and guest speaking. So love her to pieces.
Truly. Also, PSA to all of the Artpop Tarts, if you want us to come speak at your Zoom class or any speaking engagement ever, Gianna and I are trying to put ourselves out there and trying to do that more. So we'd definitely be interested in coming to talk at any type of event. You know, we do birthday parties, we do anniversaries, we'll do a Zoom class, anything we can get our hands on, really.
Right, I'll give a toast at your wedding, anything. I'm not thirsty at all.
That's so funny. So actually, something else Gianna and I were talking about before we started recording was over the weekend, I started revamping my resume and CV and cover letter. It's almost time for me to get back out there on the job market outside of APT. So if APT doesn't get, picked up by a media company within the next 6 months, I got to start looking for another job. So I posted my resume in the Artpop Tarts Facebook group, and I was just getting a lot of other feedback over the weekend. And Gianna and I are both in this position. Gianna, you've been working on your resume for longer than I have, but We were thinking about bringing back APT Happy Hour in June, and Gianna and I, since we were talking about resumes and networking and the job hunt, we thought that maybe our June APT Happy Hour might be a good opportunity for us to network a little bit more, to talk about job opportunities, to talk about interview tips. We could do a resume swap. We could do cover letter reads. If that's something you all are interested in, definitely let us know, and we will pick up your feedback across social media and get your thoughts elsewhere. But that's something we're thinking about. So yeah, let us know if that seems appealing to you. In other not so art news for today, I had looked up a story about an NFT that had to be redone after some controversy after the Oscars. It was an NFT about Chadwick Boseman, and I really wanted to do this art news story, but I realized that we have not done an episode on NFTs yet, and I feel as though we need to do a full-length episode on NFTs and explain how they are taking over the media realm, the art world, and visual culture in a whole separate episode. So that being said, we don't have an art news story for you all today because we realized that we have an upcoming episode to do for you all. So stay tuned for that one. But I can also link the article that I was thinking about if you guys are interested in learning more about that. Some little homework before we do the episode. See, Gianna, I really want to bring in an NFT expert. Maybe Theben also can come in as the APT financial correspondent and talk with us about purchasing and investments.
Yeah, he could do that.
Does he know anything about NFTs?
I'm not too sure. I don't know.
Well, I have some homework for him then.
Yeah, he can do his homework. He can figure it out.
Because I feel like I need to start investing in them, honestly.
All of our friends now, like now that we have like some friends who are married and we have dinner, like little like dinners with them, and we talk about what we're investing in, and I just feel like I am the youngin' that is just pulling on the coattails, you know what I mean?
See, I feel like when those conversations take place, I'm just a really old loser who didn't invest their money wisely, and I get scared.
I just have no money to invest. I am investing it in me right now. I'm investing it in May, in the podcast. So that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, happy May, Gianna.
Yeah, happy May. It feels oddly unsettling that it's May.
Oh, I'm very excited about the month of May. It's summer, baby. I'm pumped.
Yeah, I'm definitely. It's just I can't believe that it's already here. I can't believe that I graduated a year ago now.
Oh yeah, that's pretty wild.
I feel like time has gone by really fast and yet very slow at the same time. And I don't know how I feel about it, but I am excited to get in today's Artpop Talk. Bianca does have a very interesting story for us today.
Indeed I do. For today's Artpop Talk, we are talking about gendered art spaces. Nothing new exactly for the art world, but about 2 weeks ago, I took a day trip and I went to Gettysburg, which we are actually going to get into next week with an episode on art and monuments, so stay tuned for that. But I was in the Gettysburg Museum, and it was the most wild thing. I ran into my old roommate who I lived with during a summer internship in Milwaukee in 2018, and it was just so refreshing, honestly, after this past year to just randomly see a person that I knew out in the wild like that, especially since I moved from Oklahoma to Pennsylvania. I mean, it was so crazy to see someone I knew just in the middle of Gettysburg. But it got me reminiscing on my summer there, and I started thinking about a particular circumstance that happened to me while I was at a museum there. So I'm going to share a story with you all, and it might seem a little long as we kind of break away from our usual format. But after this story, Gianna and I are going to talk about art museums and creative environments, in particular as gendered spaces. So, Gianna, are you ready to hear about this?
I am ready. I've been ready for this episode since the days of APT Your.
All right, story time. So I was interning for a corporate art collection at a huge company in Milwaukee, and my supervisors took me on a day trip to the John Michael Kohler Art Center, which is in Sheboygan, and it's actually about an hour north of Milwaukee. The Art Center's mission is to generate a creative exchange between artists and the public. And it's conceptually connected to the Kohler Design Center, which is a showroom for the Kohler brand. So think about sinks and plumbing and interior design, if you can envision what you think of when you think of Kohler. I had a great time at the Art Center. The exhibitions on view were great, and they used the space in a really creative and experiential way, which was really refreshing at the time. The spaces kind of reminded me of, if you're in Oklahoma, something like Aha or Mixtape, or if any of you are familiar with the Meow Wolf space in Santa Fe, kind of something like that. Very interactive. Not exactly on that level, but it was cool. It was really cool. While I was there, given that the museum is tied to home and interior design, the bathrooms were supposed to be the highlight of this museum. My supervisors were telling me how cool the bathrooms were supposed to be. And when we walked into the museum, the person at the front desk made a point to tell us, you all have to go into the bathrooms. You are welcome to go into each bathroom, men and women's, throughout the museum. You have to check them out. Throughout my time at the museum, I actually didn't go into any of the bathrooms, or they call them washrooms. And while we were leaving, it wasn't until we were back at the front desk that we realized, oh, we needed to go see these bathrooms, right? Walking out, we go into the women's bathroom first because all three of us were women, and I guess it felt quote unquote natural, right? So we walk into this washroom, and Gianna and I are actually looking at pictures of it right now. And the whole bathroom is this kind of bubblegum pink color. It's tiled. It feels very decorative. It feels very antique-y. And throughout the whole bathroom, there are paintings on the tiles. And right now in the sink, we're actually looking at a painted thong. So it's a red thong with kind of white polka dots, and there are dresses and women and lingerie, kind of bras and underwear drawn or painted onto all of these pink tiles. We walk into this bathroom and we're kind of thinking like, oh, it's okay, this is kind of weird. I guess it's nice. It's personally not my aesthetic, maybe. I don't know that I enjoy seeing kind of kitschy lingerie in a bathroom situation. It's not what I was expecting. So then because we were told we were allowed to, and it doesn't really matter because there's a whole other thing about bathrooms, but the division is silly anyway. We go into the men's bathroom, and again, Gianna and I are looking at these photos now of the bathroom, and it's blue. So the women's bathroom is pink. The dominant color in the men's bathroom is blue. There's text written all over the bathroom. We're looking at a lot of what feels kind of like mosaics or almost like stained glass. The tiles, again, are painted, and they're decorated in this manner that feels almost like you're walking into Notre Dame or a medieval cathedral. The painted tiles represent almost like a sense of divinity and power. Okay, Gianna, we're looking at these photos right now, and I'm curious what your initial thoughts are. I know you haven't seen these in person, but if you had, and you had walked in from the bright pink bubblegum lingerie bathroom directly into a space designated for men that felt very powerful and divine and strong, what would your thoughts be?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I'm pretty familiar with the Kohler Artist Fellowship they have, and it is such a fantastic program. So when you were in Milwaukee and you were telling me about this experience you had walking into these bathrooms and what they're known for, this kind of functional installation of sorts, I was pretty shocked. So first impressions, using constructed terminology, the feminine bathroom is just not cute, in my opinion. Stereotypes aside, who thought creating the illusion of having thongs in the sink was a cute idea? So while the ladies' bathroom has this dirty laundry vibe, the intricacies of the masculine aesthetics in the other bathroom is more visually impressive to me. But of course, I don't like the disparities between the two. It's also interesting to me that these bathrooms in today's context are still supposed to be so highly revered because they take gender down to the basics through the use of color, blue for boys, pink for girls. And on top of that, they are clearly conceptually and thematically talking about power and identity. But I feel as though they are going about that through the use of stereotypes. These bathrooms, even in your description of them, don't really seem very innovative to me. They seem very cliché. And I guess because I don't understand why they are so revered to this day, I don't understand why they are not updated. Or, as I know we'll get into, what kind of constructive conversations are Kohler having about these spaces that are already driven by gender due to the, nature of our social structure.
Absolutely. And thinking about the experience of going into a bathroom can be so charged. A lot of the times, you and I are privileged enough not to have to think about that. But when you walk into these spaces, and even for myself, who doesn't have to think about which bathroom I'm going into because I know that I'll feel comfortable going into one or the other, I felt completely shocked and suffocated after seeing what the other bathroom had to offer. And walking into the men's bathroom, again, I don't usually have that feeling of uncomfortability, but when you go into the men's bathroom, it was so starkly different, and the messaging from the images and the text in the men's bathroom was so strong that I've never felt so uncomfortable and felt like I didn't belong in this realm, in this space. I mean, the messages that I instantly received were so powerful just by walking into these decorated spaces.
Mm-hmm. And not only the ways in which we'll decorate, but one other thing that I think is particularly important about the differences of the two, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the bathroom for boys has the use of language and text in it. And
Yes.
You're not only receiving visual messages, but you're receiving written messages of empowerment, where again, in the women's bathroom, you have the body being used for aesthetics, and there
Yes.
is not language involved.
Yes. Okay. So I'm so glad you brought that up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read the descriptions of those two washrooms from the website themselves. And this is such an important point you make, Gianna. So again, I saw these washrooms 3 years ago, and from when I looked at the website, it looks like they haven't changed. So here's the description for the men's. This washroom is called the social history of architecture. I'm sorry, let me repeat that. The social history of architecture. Okay.
And what's the other one called?
The women's room. Okay.
I'm not well.
New York artist Matt Nolan created a ceiling-to-floor tile mural for the largest of the washrooms. His interpretive, The Social History of Architecture, is a tour of architectural periods from ancient Egypt to the present. On the longest uninterrupted wall, illustrations of architectural icons progress through the ages, beginning with the modern era and continuing through the art historical periods of Art Nouveau, Victorian, Baroque, Gothic, Medieval, Ancient Rome, and Ancient Egypt. On the opposite wall, tiles and fixtures portray the hands of rulers or visionaries from each successive period with appropriate symbols of power. Rulers and visionaries, symbols of power.
I would like to know what an appropriate symbol of power
I'll
looks
tell you.
like.
I'll tell you, they think from a cell phone to the Pope's ring. While in the washroom, you may make use of various fixtures. You can imagine yourself as a pharaoh, a Caesar, a pontiff, or a CEO. This subtle empowerment of the individual is reinforced by a quote by poet, writer, and natural philosopher Johann Wolfgang von Goethe that rings the soaring blue ceiling of the room. Quote, "Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." All right. Round one. Now, as a comparison, I'm just going to read what is titled The Women's Room. All right. Massachusetts artist Cynthia Constantino was selected to create the first new artist-designed washroom for the Arts Center since 1999. Constantino worked 7 days a week from June through December of 2004 with the help of 2 interns, 4 volunteers, and numerous Kohler co-associates. Should we break it down? Because right off the bat, I didn't get any of that in the description of the men's washroom.
I was just thinking about that. It's so
this is like a Judy Chicago situation where the male genius artist did this all by himself, and here Cynthia has a bunch of help with her. No, this is no shame or anything like that on Cynthia. It's just a point.
Well, the other one definitely had assistance. It's not just one person creating either, but it's interesting that this description makes a point to talk about the process and the other one does not.
Right. The Women's Room opened to the public in June 2005. Loved at once for its buoyant colors and dazzling hand-painted imagery. The Women's Room addresses issues of identity, reflecting the artist's own affection and aversion towards what society has defined as female. Constantino created over 30 original sculpture reliefs of female body types, animal figures, objects and accessories, and plants. These were used to create molds from which Constantino cast hundreds of individual tiles that she then hand-painted. Constantino arranged the tiles in various combinations to create cohesive bodies, both recognizable female figures and fantastical forms. The figures, which can be read as, quote, pure play, also suggest the many roles of women in society with references to fairy tales, myths, and cultural slang. Other elements of the room include over 120 glazed paintings of hats, shoes, hand-painted sinks and toilets, and tiles lining the interior of the bathroom stalls. Painted in a colorful, light, and expressive manner, the stall areas depict a near-categorical display of women's undergarments and accessories, including undergarments, stockings, hair combs, jewelry, and handbags. Both playful and exploratory, Constantino's work reminds us of the plenitude from which we can choose to craft our identities, presented openly, lovingly, and inclusively.
Okay, so
What do you got?
here's the thing. Here's the thing. we've talked about this before. There is a time for purposeful objectification to talk about things such as identity, especially when it comes to these types of bodies. I don't get any of that visually by looking at the space. I don't see things that are presented openly, lovingly, and inclusive, because you're only visually documenting objects or products that are associated with specifically femininity. You're not giving people with these types of bodies the opportunity to explore other ways of being a female. And again, it's presented in critiquing the ways in which women appear visually. Another statement in this artist statement that I thought was interesting was where in the statement it says, the women's room addresses issues of identity, reflecting the artist's own affection and aversion towards what society has defined as female. I understand that a little bit, but they're not giving enough visual cues in the space, I feel as though, to create that kind of conversation. I get it in maybe the ways that she is kind of taking the body to its full extent and putting it on display in normative ways, and also embellishing the figure and distorting it. But also this statement about the artist being conflicted with her affection and aversion towards feminine roles also, I think, contradicts the last statement that is saying that these visual cues are presented openly, lovingly, and inclusive.
Right. Here's the thing about that last statement, presented openly, lovingly, and inclusively. I have a really hard time getting on the bandwagon that these bathrooms are inclusive. I am just looking at pictures of what I'm seeing online, and this could be a correction that we may need to make, but I don't see anybody who's not fully bodily abled. I don't see any type of diversity of shapes. I don't see a ton of diversity of color. These are white, able-bodied women that appear in the bathroom tiles, and that's not a bad thing, right? And I don't have a problem with an artist using this imagery in other spaces. You know, if they wanted to create a personal work, like Gianna, your work, for any other, you know, white women artist who is talking about gender issues, presentation, that of course that's a huge part of different struggles for all types of women. But I have a huge problem with this public space, a very public space, a very also a weirdly private space at the same time, showing you, and then a place where you also look in the mirror and kind of think about and ponder the way you look, your identity in women's bathrooms, you know, speaking for probably Gianna and mine's own experience, a place where you touch up your makeup, where you are concerned with your appearance. I get this statement, but I don't think that it's appropriate or inclusive whatsoever for a public bathroom like this.
And I think the way that this statement is written is very, very reflective of installation works of art created by women, in the way that it's written about it and documented, and talking about the process of it all and the volunteerism of it all.
Yep.
I think that is a very uncomfortable and kind of transparent way of writing about this. The other thing is, I am all for art that embraces female experiences and embraces femininity. Like that's great. That is, if you are a person that identifies as female and identifies as being feminine and wants to present themselves in that way, then that is great. But don't tell me this space is inclusive to different types of bodies and different types of female experiences when you are only critiquing one way of being female. Aside from all of that, again, you are just further gendering a bathroom.
Yeah.
And I am really, really tired of these spaces being gendered. There's only one way your body can function in this space, and like that is what both these spaces are doing, and you know, it's just frustrating. It's really hard.
Yeah, and also to your point, Gianna, let's talk about the language that's being used here, because when typically in our kind of colloquial English language, we use the women's room and the men's room. And here we have the title of the piece is called The Women's Room, which is a gender identity. But in the description, they are talking about female bodies in particular, which is a sex designation. Female is not a gender. So that in itself, you call it the women's room, but then within that, you talk explicitly about female bodies, and that is not present in the men's room description. The men's room description isn't called the men's room. It's called the social history of architecture, and nowhere in the text do I see language about male bodies.
I would also like to talk about the ways in which the appliances are decorated. I think it's, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier in the women's bathroom, the sink with the, making the illusion that this like thong is like floating in there. You know, I get it. Like, I mean, it's kind of like catchy, like whatever, but it's like,
very
ew, it's like you have like
and
dirty laundry in the sink, like, okay, whatever. And then there are like bobby pins painted on the sink, and that's kind of like clever. I'm getting like flashbacks to like freshman year living in a dirty bathroom with my college roommate. But I think the way that, for example, looking at this image, the way the urinals are adorned and decorated so highly and so intricately. The boy bathroom is honestly, it's astonishing. The attention to detail, floor to ceiling, it's just covered and it's intricate and it's beautiful. It's very, very impressive. I'm a lot more impressed by the decoration happening here just visually than I am in the other room. But the way that these freaking urinals are decorated. Look, this big long one has like an arch in it and like a stained glass window.
Yeah, and the hands above the urinal are in a type of prayer position. And so if you're thinking about the act of a man using the urinal, and then whenever you're standing in the urinal space, there are prayer hands over you as you complete your act in the washroom.
And there are three next to each other in this image, giving me this also triptych vibe. There's a narrative and kind of a elongated scene in between each of the three urinals. Some of the text reads, "Finding beauty through art," and "Defending the castle."
It's truly mind-blowing. And again, like going back to artist Cynthia Constantino, this is not a degradation of her work in any way. In really any other circumstance, I think I would find her work very cute and kitschy. And Gianna and I love that kind of stuff. I love pink. Pink is probably my favorite color. I don't have a problem with the color pink. I have a huge problem when a men's and women's bathroom is designated as pink and blue. Another thing is, I took these descriptions of the washrooms from the website, and I'm not sure who was responsible for submitting or writing these texts. So that's something I'm really curious about, and I would love to hear from the staff at the Kohler Art Center about this. But just that being said, did someone at the center, did a curator write this text? Just because if it was coming from the artists, I think there's a separate issue of artist statements. Maybe it's just very interesting how different they are from a male artist, presumably Matt Nolan, and a woman artist, again, presumably Cynthia Constantino. But if it was written from the perspective of a curator, this is completely unacceptable. Well, it is unacceptable to describe the social history of architecture in this manner and then boil down the women's room into such a flat visual description.
Yeah. And this is all to say too, especially for people who are like new to the visual world and aren't as susceptible to all the visual cues that they're just starting to learn about in these types of spaces. This is why looking at the writing of the work is so important, because if you or as a curator, as a person, if you're not understanding the really problematic things at play here, I mean, you can just see the discrepancies in the writing and the way that they're talked about. I mean, my God, it's like, hit me over the head with a hammer with it. Why don't you?
Right. Seriously. Just comparing the two descriptions is pretty unbelievable.
If going from one space to the next wasn't jarring enough, the descriptions of these are quite, I mean, it's not shocking. It's just, I feel very jarred as a person who has not been able to experience them fully in the space.
Right. And for all of our listeners, we're going to link all of this on our resources page. We'll also post images of both the bathrooms and the descriptions. We will post the descriptions in our Instagram as well for you. So I also wanted to, just before we move on, say that we're only talking about these two bathrooms because these are the two that I went into, but I think there's maybe 6 other washrooms throughout the museum. They're all listed on their website, and they have children's bathrooms, which are very interesting to analyze. They're very different, and I would say visually make sense as a children's bathroom for their children's center. But they do have other men's and women's bathrooms. And I was looking at one of the women's bathrooms, and the content really isn't that much different. It's very antiquated. I think it's a very beautiful bathroom. And if you just went into that using it, you probably wouldn't think anything of it. But in that other women's washroom, there are kind of like these handheld mirrors and handheld objects of kind of vanity and performance and that creation of an image that are present in the other women's washroom as well. And I'll link a photo of that for you all as well. It kind of reminds me of the objects that old Rose holds in the Titanic movie. It's like a comb, her mirror, like it looks very old. And these objects are kind of, I don't want to say rusted, but they look as though they've been kind of underwater on the Titanic for 100 years.
Through the visuals of each of these bathrooms, it's clear that the functions of them are also different. While people with certain types of bodies are using the boy bathroom, they are reading empowering scripture almost. Yeah. While they are using the bathroom to do number 1 or do number 2. In the other bathroom, it's less about why we use a bathroom and how our bodies function in those spaces. It's about the ritual act of getting ready and decorating your own body. Yes. And we can talk about how bathrooms are used in those ways, but don't tell me that bathrooms aren't used in that way for men.
For men. Yes.
So just they have decided to put this into the world, and this artist has decided to put that in the world. And I have a lot of things to critique about this artist. I will say there's nothing wrong with wanting to identify as a woman and identifying as being feminine, but there are some things to critique here on the artist's part as well. You know, you created a bathroom and you're not talking about how our bodies function anatomically in that space. You're talking about how we present ourselves and get ready to present our own bodies and go into the world and tell people that I am a feminine person.
Yes, 1000%.
Where things go beyond the bathroom or the washroom in that setting, but for the men bathroom, it's like, oh yeah, I just peed in this urinal. Now I can go out and I can act like a CEO.
Be a CEO. I can be a CEO because I just took a piss in this bathroom.
Yep.
Sorry to be crass, but also
how I feel.
Sorry.
But let's get on. Yeah, let's move forward.
Yeah, so that's a great segue, Gianna, because I want to talk about the messages that we are going to take with us after leaving a space like this. So I got home that evening, and if any of my friends know me, you know that I tend to freak out very easily. So I am fuming at this one. I mean, this has been 3 years now and I'm still physically angry about it. So I get back to my dorm room that I'm staying in for my internship, and I sat down and I wrote a letter to the museum. And I opened the letter with my appreciation for the arts, and I let them know who I was and my background, and that I really did enjoy my experience at the museum. I enjoyed the exhibitions that were on view so much. I had a really great time. And I moved into the kind of obvious optics that Gianna and I were just talking about between pink and blue, and this idea that bathrooms needed to be divided anyway. So I worked through that in the beginning of the letter. And at the time I was writing the letter, the previous semester of classes I had just gone through, I took a seminar on ornament, which Gianna and I have talked about in our episode, What's Funny About Eating Pussy. So if you're interested or haven't listened to that episode and want to learn more about ornament and what I'm about to talk about with the men's room, definitely go back and listen to that episode. This whole time in my head, I'm kind of reeling about how ornament has completely informed my perception of these rooms because I had just taken a class on that, which dealt heavily with social architecture. And that's something that I was writing about for my thesis. So anyway, in the letter, I wrote, women and normative femininity have historically been thought of and characterized as the, quote, decorative, the interior, the domestic. Whereas men and normative hegemonic masculinities have historically been given access and advantages to the outside world, the public, the exterior, as the bathroom suggests, the architectural world. The bathroom suggests that women are to be treated as decorative pieces as they seem embedded within the washroom tiles. The women's restroom in no way, quote, reminds us of the plenitude from which we can choose to craft our identities, presented openly, lovingly, and inclusively, as Gianna and I read from the description. In fact, as someone who identifies as a woman, after seeing the men's restroom, I felt I was put into a box. I felt suffocated. So that's part of what I wrote in the letter. And Gianna, I just want to see if you have any thoughts about that architectural realm as you were just describing. So again, in the men's bathroom, it's called The Social History of Architecture. We see this access to a powerful and outdoor realm, a very kind of public world that reinforces men's place within that. So just before we move on, do you have any other thoughts about this architectural presence?
Yeah, well, the types of architecture that is being represented and is symbolic in this space is very tightly close to religion. And that's another element that I feel as though isn't really being talked about openly in these spaces. It's just a normative, oppressive way of going about decorating a man's space. And I am just imagining, of course, kind of going into the bathroom that you're more comfortable with first, and then walking into this other space where you instantaneously feel like I don't belong here. Like you're telling me I can go into this space and it's almost worse because this space wasn't meant for me. And I don't feel like I should be experiencing this. And that is really, really sad to me. So I think the iconography that is attached to religion is also just another way of exploring masculinity and power in ways that is just normal. And it's upsetting.
Yeah, I think I really teared up when I was in the bathrooms, and above one of the sinks, it says CEO. And if I'm recalling this correctly, it's a sink, and of course, above a sink, you generally have a mirror. And to look at yourself in this space that is reinforcing your power as a man, and to see the words CEO written in your reflection was heartbreaking. I mean, I think I would be all about that if that was in a women's designated environment, something that actually did feel inclusive for Black women, for trans women, women of color. Yeah, I don't even know how to explain my feeling of sadness in that moment to see those words in a space that I didn't feel comfortable.
That's such an interesting point about the mirrors, because obviously when you enter a space like this, you're experiencing the role that you play within that space and how you either do or do not identify with it. But the physical act of reflection and being able to look at your own portrait in the space and contemplate for a second what you're feeling, whereas opposed to the other bathroom, like what, I'm just supposed to look at myself and what, put on some lipstick.
Exactly.
And I also just feel like there are things in that space that are also really triggering for me. Like when I see that like thong in the space, like part of my chronic illness is, so many things that are related to my vaginal health. And like thongs are so bad for your vaginal health. And that's one of the reasons that can lead you to getting like so many UTIs. But what, I'm supposed to wear this fucking polka dotted thong because I'm a woman, and like I'm supposed to look at myself in that space and just decorate my body? Like fuck that. Like it's really upsetting.
And not only the text that reads CEO and the other text, having text alongside the architectural element presents an image of literacy, of ability, of education, of class. It presents this whole other world that for so long women weren't allowed to be a part of, and even now are still struggling to break that equality gap. And to have text that reads to you in a male bathroom, you can be CEO, but in the women's bathroom, you're right, it's decorative, it's artificial, it's crafted, it's aesthetic. It's not something that immediately represents a type of higher education. It's really insane that these bathrooms are still up.
And just even thinking about femininity and for women who identify as being feminine and want to visually and aesthetically present themselves as feminine, I think most people would agree that because of time and progression and history and fashion and aesthetics for women, for females, this is just so hard to feel that in that space because this is so outdated. For things in that men's bathroom, I think have almost like withstanded time because that power at play has still not changed that much. But women's fashion and the way that we identify and integrate ourselves into society has changed. So it's so hard to even experience what we're supposed to experience in that space with the artist's intent, because I mean just so much has happened between 1999 to now.
Right. And just to make a point, Gianna and I are also in no way saying that fashion can't be empowering, can't be public, can't have a weighted presence in our society. Fashion is hugely powerful. And that's also not to say that, religion and religious experiences can't be meaningful and powerful. It's just that the experiences of these bathrooms in the way that they are discussed, written about, and presented are not functioning in those dual manners. They don't leave any wiggle room for either to experience a quote-unquote opposite type of empowerment for whatever person may be walking in those spaces. It's very controlling and static in their meaning. But I didn't want to leave that out, that fashion and any type of human experience no matter your gender identity, can be powerful, even if it's associated with something that's typically designated as
right, and that's
womanly or manly.
And that's my point. It's just way too complex. So to me, to try to experience what this artist's intent was is just not happening, because it's only giving me a certain type of option that also even feels a little bit outdated for the late 90s. Like, I feel like I'm walking into like a 50s bathroom or something.
Yeah. Like something from Mad Men.
Yeah,
right? When I think of those bathrooms, I think of the dynamics that are present in Mad Men. I wrote that letter, and in the letter, I wrote that I'm not naive to the issues of board members. I know that funding is a huge problem for our museums, and there are executive decisions beyond curatorial and directorial control. And whoever may be reading my letter may not be in charge of redoing the washrooms, and it may not have been their choice in the first place to have those washrooms go up. So another part of this problem is that there are boards on museums, which Gianna and I have talked about, and executives that hold power, often white men, who won't allow museums to change part of their architecture, their founding, what seems traditional or important to those spaces. So I wrote that in the letter. I understand that these are issues, but I think that you need to be creative in the way that you think about further presentation. So the next day, I got a call from the museum's director. And I truly don't know, I guess, how to frame the call, other than, to me, it felt very unproductive. And this is not to say that the director wasn't very kind in calling me. I absolutely appreciated a museum director taking the time to talk with me about my concerns. I don't know what the intentions were in that call, if it was just simply to kind of please a disgruntled guest, or if it was really an effort to make his space better. I would kind of lean towards the former, because in our conversation, I didn't necessarily feel like I was taken seriously. My concerns, I don't want to say that they were dismissed entirely, but it was more of a one-sided conversation where, from the director, he was kind of talking at me about what the spaces mean and what the spaces can do and how art is subjective and all that kind of stuff, rather than having a productive conversation about moving forward and how to better make this space inclusive. And that's something, as if you've listened to our previous episodes on my thesis work, that's something that my thesis work is heavily about. And of course, Gianna and I talk about this on the podcast all the time, but we can take problematic pieces of art and use them to have productive conversations. And I think that's what Gianna and I are doing today. We are talking about the issues of this piece. And what I said to the director on the phone call was, again, in my letter I wrote, I understand you may not be able to knock out both of these bathrooms and create a new space. I know that is a huge financial undertaking for an art museum, but maybe have a public forum about the pieces. Maybe have kind of an interactive experience where viewers and audiences can leave sticky notes in the bathrooms about their thoughts. How are you going to include a diverse public audience in a space where they may not feel comfortable? So that was kind of my side of the conversation, was how can you move forward and suggesting ideas for kind of community dialogue about the space. And I feel as though it wasn't taken seriously. That's just my perspective. The phone call was, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. And I think at the time I was getting pretty emotional on the call. I remember I was at work when they called me, and I was in our archive room, and I started crying on the phone call, which didn't lend well to this idea that, you know, women and their emotions or whatever. I felt really dumb for crying on the phone call, but I got overwhelmed and flustered, and I was frustrated. And for me, that just comes out as crying. I wasn't bawling my eyes out, but I was struggling a little bit to kind of get my words out. So I kind of regret that about the phone call, but that's just my own lack of being able to articulate myself on the spot. I've said that on the podcast before. I really struggle with finding the right words in the moment. I really need time to digest this. Like it's been 3 years and now we're finally talking about this bathroom situation. So I did have that call with the director, and again, if they're listening, I would absolutely love to have you come on the podcast and have a more productive conversation about these bathrooms. And I hope you are doing that. But from my perspective, just based on the site, that's not really happening, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of, the higher ups and the conversation that you had with these people at Kohler, were you able to learn if this issue had come up before, or were you the first to bring it to their attention?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't remember if I asked him that question or not. I think I wrote in my letter, which I have the draft of, I think I wrote something along the lines of, surely I'm not the first one to bring this to your attention. How is this still an issue? It's highly offensive, and I would appreciate it if you would have a dialogue about this, or have a notice on your site or something about it, how the landscape of our language, of women's studies, of visual culture has changed. Something on ornament, how ornament and architecture is highly masculinized, something with a little bit more curatorial presence to it. And I don't remember getting an answer to that in the phone call. And I will say I didn't, to my shock, I didn't find too much public response. Just I was looking online for other opinions about the bathrooms. I did see some reviews on TripAdvisor, which we'll link on our resources, that called these bathrooms out as being very sexist. So that was interesting to see someone leaving a public review, but I didn't find too much. You know what? I did find a website that was all about urinals and how the Kohler urinals were, these amazing kind of works of art. And on Google reviews and TripAdvisor and things like that, everyone is going on about how beautiful the bathrooms are. Everyone's like, oh, you have to go into the bathrooms. You have to go into the bathrooms. Check out the bathrooms. And I'm wondering how many of those visitors only went into one bathroom. Yeah. I'm just curious, because on the urinal website, that's a website that was about urinals. It was like a cool blog, actually. That is a cool thing to do. Mm-hmm. But obviously there are no urinals in the women's bathroom.
Which is also stupid.
Which is also doesn't make any... Yeah.
Did they definitively say that they were making strides to address this issue, or to make it more susceptible for a contemporary audience?
No. Not that I remember. I don't remember anything about more conversations to come, if I'm remembering correctly.
The comment that upsets me the most in your conversation for him was him to broadly say, or, whatever verbiage he used, but basically was saying to you that, art is subjective. And isn't that just the cop-out that we love to hear? Well, discrimination and sexism in the art world and art experiences are still real.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to say other than that. You are so right that people, not one person is going to feel the exact same way about entering any of these spaces. Everybody is going to have a different interaction and experience with each of these spaces, and you need to be prepared for that, because art is objective. So this is a good point for us to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about other experiences with some bathrooms and talk about the social conversation around these types of spaces.
right, welcome back, everybody. So, thinking about the conversation that Gianna and I just had about the Kohler Art Center washrooms, when we were preparing for this episode, I was thinking about, again, how can we take something that feels very divisive, feels very antiquated, and take that into a progressive conversation? Or find progressive examples or other examples of how we might revisit a similar situation. Because, our world is so visually stimulating. And I think it's amazing that spaces want to take something that might feel as mundane as using a washroom to an artful and experiential level. I don't have a problem with that at all. But how are some ways that we can maybe think differently about those spaces in a way that does feel more inclusive, or just lets us think about different things other than designated body parts and dated ideas about masculinity and femininity?
Yeah, I also just think it's so interesting in today's climate to not have some kind of conversation about bathrooms or washrooms, because they are part of such large social context. And as a company known for innovation in the arts, it does surprise me that these bathrooms have not been evolved or have changed in the ways that they are viewed, or that we have knowledge to them given to us by the institution. I say this also because, as you said, they let anyone from any gender view or use both of these bathrooms, and yet they are purposely using visual design and aesthetics to further separate and distinguish gender, sex, and the way that bodies operate in a construct. It seems odd, and it seems counterintuitive to better social practices that I actually believe this company has from artists that I have known that have been involved with Kohler.
Right. And while I was there, we went to the Kohler Design Center, which is a separate facility from the art center. It's basically a design showroom for Kohler. And that was the highlight of my day. I mean, the showroom at Kohler was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And obviously, being part of the visual realm, Gianna and I love interior design. And it was amazing to see the power of an interior space. And speaking of, it makes no sense that the men's washroom would talk about the power of the architectural world when Kohler in itself is a company dedicated to the advancement of interior spaces, which has historically been designated as a domestic, feminized space. And we can talk about so many artworks. Woman House is the first one that comes to mind just because of my research, that talks about, interestingly, the dynamic of interior spaces. And that's something that we talked about in the What's Funny About Eating Pussy episode with the daughters of Edward Darley Watt. Thinking about interiors is fucking cool. And I think that Kohler has a lot of potential to use the advancement of interiors and home design in a bathroom space.
Yeah, well,
it doesn't make any sense.
Art is subjective, Bianca.
Oh my god.
It's just subjective. Art is silly.
So I was trying to think about a bathroom that is cool and that may be more productive in having an artful conversation. So I have yet to go to SF MoMA. I am dying to go. The San Francisco Museum of Modern Art is so high up on my list of museums to go to in this country. It's ridiculous. But again, the art history babes, we love them. They have talked about the bathrooms at SF MoMA, and I've always been curious about these bathrooms since they have talked about it on their podcast before. And I went to SF MoMA's site and I was looking into their bathrooms, and SF Moma Bathrooms has their own website, which we will link for you. And I'm going to quote straight from their site. SF Moma Bathrooms is an interactive and print experience showcasing the bathrooms located at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. These bathrooms extend the experience of the museum into liminal spaces that usually take no part in an experience of art. The SF Moma Bathrooms live here as an extension into the virtual space and as a gallery to share with the world. Become a part of the virtual gallery by taking a picture in any SF Moma bathroom and tagging SF Moma Bathrooms on Instagram to be added to the growing collection. I think that's really cool that if we think about bathroom selfies, I mean, that is a really interesting point of visual culture that we are contemporarily wrestling with. And I think bathroom selfies do have a lot of gendered context to go into, but here at SF Moma Bathrooms, they are not limiting a bathroom selfie to one restroom or the other. And they're telling all people to take a photo in the bathroom because it's a cool art experience to contemplate their reflection no matter their identity and share it with people. And I think it's a really interesting idea to share publicly a bathroom experience. That's just another element that we may not think about when we take a bathroom selfie. If you're out with your friends, you're at the club, taking a bathroom selfie, it's really interesting how the lack of gender is filled with other components to think about. On this site, SF Moma Bathrooms, the bathrooms are listed by color. They're not listed by men's and women's. They're listed by third room pink, first floor red, or whatever. And I'm not sure if in the actual museum the restrooms are split up by men and women, or if they're gender inclusive, since the site isn't split up that way. So I don't know what it looks like in person, but they do have urinals. So I would just at the outset, I guess, assumed that they're divided between men and women's. But on the site, it's so different from the Kohler. It's listed by color. It's listed by an art experience. And when Gianna and I are now looking at the SF Moma restrooms, and they're void of anything but light and color except for the plumbing that you use to do your bathroom act.
Yeah. It's almost interesting to me that they didn't have the actual appliances be part of the color blocking that's happening here. That would be really interesting. Yeah, I like some of the things at play here in these bathrooms, just breaking it down to I almost take that back. Is it interesting that they're creating this void, but they're also calling more attention to the function of the appliances, in which, as you said, they still might be separated by men and women's bathrooms. Yeah. Is that better?
I don't know. And it is, I think it would be a larger discussion for us to have about selfies in general, but particularly the genre of a bathroom selfie and what SF MoMA and their Instagram account is trying to push. And I don't want to assume that it would be a bathroom selfie, but that's generally, if you take a picture in a bathroom, that's kind of what you do. It's kind of become a contemporary experience of a bathroom, I would say.
And I like the act of making the bathroom experience more transparent and more public in a way, and that just normalizes the idea of what people do in bathrooms and how we use that, and I like all of that. But are they truly creating kind of a void space here if there's still distinction in appliances?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, and I think obviously that does, the appliances, just based on the use of them, are interesting in forming your identity in the bathroom space. And it's also interesting to think about the urinal as an art object. I mean, with Duchamp and how that is a presence of typically masculinity, not always, but and it doesn't have to be that way. So
No, and
what power are we giving or taking away from appliances as they act as a art experience?
Right. And I think that's where I am getting really hung up on the urinal of it all. And I felt that way in looking at the Kohler bathrooms. Just the way they are like decorated is just astonishing to me, that not more people have something to say about that. But urinals play a very specific part in art history.
The lineage of that.
You know, and I just get really frustrated because we all use sinks, we all have mirrors, we all use toilets, but we have this idea that only people who identify as male and are assigned at birth as male and have a penis use a urinal, which in fact, there are people who identify as women and have penises and need to use a urinal and don't want to use a men's bathroom. And it's really frustrating that these, appliances are still only privy to those who are cisgender.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So I know we're going a little long maybe on this conversation, and I had originally kind of thought about another gendered space with my experience at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, and just thinking about a very specific type of energy and presence that is reflected in generally attending a space like that or visiting a space like that. Just thinking about how when I walked into a portrait room or just a room of paintings in the National Museum of Women in the Arts, I had this moment where I realized that there were no naked women on the walls. It was just such a stark contrast from a kind of quote unquote traditional museum space where you walk in and you immediately see a bunch of naked women. And it's interesting that in the Kohler bathrooms, in a bathroom space, you're seeing these female figures, again, using their terminology, that are, unclothed, that are showing off their lingerie, that are being these kind of decorative objects. And then just thinking about art museums as gendered spaces in our conversation today, it reminded me of this moment where at the National Museum for Women in the Arts, it is a space designated to women artists and diverse women artists, but that doesn't mean that we take it down to a nude female experience. And in that room that I was in, it broke away from that tradition that is so prominent, that line in art history that shows the female nude. And it was just kind of something I was thinking about as we were getting ready for this episode, but we can definitely have a longer conversation about that museum for a different day. It would be great to go there and talk with some people at the museum as well. So in kind of wrapping up for today, I just want to hear some closing thoughts from you, Gianna. As a creator yourself, what does the gendering of a creative space mean for a bathroom? And would you ever be interested in working on a space like a bathroom or a washroom as an artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously, for our research that we did for this week. But, I would be interested in the, of the neutrality of a space like this more so than what I see, being pushed in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. However, I'm almost at this point more interested in the design and concept of the appliance itself. I
think as a sculptor too, that just is really interesting for your work.
I think so too, and I've really been thinking about it a lot this week. Instead of, I think before you just walk into a space and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make this gender neutral bathroom, I think you have to first look at each individual aspect. And I think starting with the appliance, toilets and urinals and sinks and mirrors above sinks, like those are all created and constructed based on the way that bodies function and that we've been told that they function. But I would be really interested in making a toilet or a urinal and reinventing that concept and making it functional for different types of people, and even creating a new object in its own. Maybe that, the one that I don't use terminology of being a urinal, it's entirely something new. I think that would be really cool. And maybe there's an artist who has already done that I'm just unfamiliar with. I mean, I think it's interesting that we are talking about restrooms or bathrooms associated with institutions linked to art. I do think that homes and interior design, as we said, are highly tied to gender and construct, and I think museums are as well. I think I like to challenge this idea that museums are such democratic spaces, and we've talked about that a lot. They are and they are not. In the words of Roxane Gay, I challenge galleries to stop being so terrible. But if museums weren't gendered spaces, then we wouldn't have this designation of feminist wing and this designation of censoring some works of art and displaying works of art over.
We wouldn't need a museum that's designated to women artists and the advancement of women in the arts. Museums are highly gendered spaces. Public spaces are gendered spaces because we are still living in a social construct, and we can work to help spread knowledge about how that is harmful, but it's something that we still feel and we still experience. So to anyone at the John Michael Kohler Arts Center, Gianna Martucci Fink is available to redo your bathrooms if you'd like. So I just want to put that out there. And also to anyone at the museum, anyone who works in any type of space like this, we would love to hear from you. Like we said, this was a critical conversation, but we do want to use it to be productive. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this is we can be critical while still finding progress and moving forward. So I would just, and hopefully we'll hear from you.
If you are a museum that has gender assigned bathrooms currently, stop doing that. You can just fix your signage and have people use whatever bathroom they want. Don't just do it for the month of June. Don't just do it for queer events that you're having and then take them down, because I've experienced that a lot at different institutions and my own institution. So stop doing that. And that's a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. So we hope you all enjoyed this episode. I thought it was super fun to revisit that.
Love that journey for you.
Yeah, love talking about bathrooms today.
I did. I really enjoyed it.
As always, please feel free to email us with your thoughts, concerns, musings at artpoptalk@gmail.com. Please share this episode with your friends. We are constantly trying to grow our community. We have a Facebook group that you all can join, and we'll be reaching out across social media to see if you would be interested in a kind of networking happy hour for the month of June. So keep an eye out for that. And I think with that, we will talk to you on Tuesday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Artpop Talk's production assistant is Audrey Kaminsky. Music and sounds by Josh Turner. Photography is by Adrian Turner. And our graphic designer is Sid Hammond.